like a candle dance. Rush the speaker that booms, I'm killing your brain like a poisonous mushroom, deadly. When I play adult vanity, anything less than the best is a vanity. Love it or leave it, you better gain weight. You better hit the bullseye, the kid don't play. And if there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby. Vanilla ice, ice, baby. Vanilla ice, ice, baby. Vanilla ice, ice, baby. Now that the party is jumping, we hear the bass kicked in, the fingers are a-puffin'. Quick to the point, no faking. Cooking MCs like a pound of bacon. When I'm quick and nimble, I go crazy when I hear a cymbal and a hi-hat with a souped-up tempo. I'm on a roll and it's time to go solo, rolling in my 5.0 with my rag top down so my hair can blow. The girlie's on standby, waiting just to say hi. Did you stop? No, I just drove by. Kept on, pursuing to the next stop. I bust a left and I'm headed to the next stop. That block was dead, yo, so I continue to A1A. Cause I'm a typical poet with Miami's on the scene. Just in case you didn't know, it my town that created all the bass sound. Enough to shake and kick holes in the ground. Keep my composure when it's time to get loose. Magnetized by the mic when I kick my juice. And if there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby.
Cool. I didn't like that. Nice.
Ice, ice, baby. Word to your mother.
Okay.
Today is gonna be the day that we're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you got.
I'm gonna go grab a White Claw real quick.
I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. About you now. Backbeat, the wood is on the street, that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had it out. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. About you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding. And all the lights that light the way are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. I don't know how. 'Cause maybe, oh, you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, oh, you're my wonderwall. Let me tell you that today is gonna be the day that we never throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you're not to do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding. And all the lights that light the way are blinding. Oh, 'cause there are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. Oh, I don't know how. But maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me.
We're right back.
You're my wonderwall, baby. Let me tell you that maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall. Tell me, Ryan, you're my wonderwall.
I just refuse to help Jacqueline pick up carrots. It's showtime, baby.
There are more important things
Yeah.
than eyesight.
Yeah. Okay. I think it just comes down to like turning it off like once the clip is over, and also muting. I noticed the last time we did it, when you were giving us questions from people listening, you left the mic on after that, so we were getting a ton of echo between those answering the stuff.
Without
is
what
it
on?
supposed to?
I just realized this mic was on, but I wasn't using it, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a huge difference. It was only when it was answering viewer questions. That was the only time that there was echoing.
I'm hearing myself pretty loud, I think, in yours, Corey. Although now I'm not, so maybe it is coming from Jesse's. Okay. Yeah, I can't hear myself in the echo now, so.
Wait. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, folks at home. Welcome to 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. I'm Corey Behringer here with Court Hansen. How you doing, Court?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just peachy keen. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
the show we got set up tonight.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't plan it much ahead. It was pretty much this morning. He said, like, any ideas? I had none, because we kind of want to save the band episodes for having guests.
Yeah.
That's what I'm keeping that as like a tasty treat for future episodes. Kind of once we also figure out how this show works.
Yeah,
I
we
think.
don't want to waste someone's time by having them on the show, and then that would be
Exactly.
terrible.
Yeah,
Imagine
no.
that.
Yeah, right now we're limiting the wasting to the viewers' time. Like that's
Exactly,
that's
which
what
was
I'm trying to.
what it always has
keep
been.
it to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing debut singles of classic dad rock bands. Debut singles are fascinating to me because they're like this little snapshot in a very specific time in any artist's career. I mean, any album is that, any recording is that, but there's something special about that first time, because it's like, I feel for a lot of them, especially, they don't know if they're ever going to have another opportunity to put something on record.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
You know,
it's pretty different from now, where you can have an internet presence before you have any music at all.
Yeah.
You know, like 99% of the bands I've been in
Yeah.
have gone, or I would say 100% actually. I don't think I've ever had but my point is, if you're going to try and make a presentation of like, this is our image, this is what we sound like, this is our personality. Back then you really only had like 2 shots, and that was the front and back side of the single. And you'd scrape together enough money and go to some person's studio and record it.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on, you know, what decade even that it happened to have been, wave of so much saturation of these labels pretty much exclusively pumping out 7-inch singles and smaller. You know, they weren't in the album business really. So
Right. That didn't
you didn't
come
necessarily
till the mid 60s. You there? Is Corey frozen for you as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
There he
freezing
is.
for me,
Okay,
and now you're back.
we're back.
Okay, are we moving
It would
again?
not be, yeah. I just got a little thing that popped up that said my connection was unstable. So maybe is it just me?
I'm not sure. Jesse's not freezing.
It seemed to be, but we're all right now. Of course, we were fine the 40 minutes before the show, and now it's it's a very natural
Okay.
pose to be frozen.
I guess we'll just truck along, hope for the best.
Yeah.
Not really much troubleshooting that can be done.
No.
So the basic format of the show, for those of you just kind of tuning in, what we're going to do is go back and forth listening to little snippets of songs that Court and I have both put on separate playlists. And Jesse Jones, manning the booth at the Stab Comedy Theater, he's going to be playing these at his discretion. So we don't know what he's about to play until he plays it. And then we're going to have a little chat about that selection after it's done.
Yeah, he's going to switch
So,
back and
with
forth
that-
between our playlists.
Yeah.
All right. Who do we want to start
the
with?
First one.
Does not matter to me.
Okay. Well,
Nope.
this one's
Dealer's
up.
choice.
So let's go with this then.
I got every reason on earth to be mad, 'cause I've just lost the only girl I've had. If I could get my way, I'd get myself locked up today, but I can't, so I cry instead. I got a chip on my shoulder that's bigger than my feet. I can't talk to people that I meet. If I could see you now, I try to make you sad somehow, but I can't, so I cry instead. Don't wanna cry when there's people there. I get shy when I stop and stare. I'm gonna have myself to wait, yeah, but I've come back again someday. I'm gonna do you better, all the girls. 'Cause I'm gonna break the heart.
So that was Joe Cocker's debut single with a cover of the Beatles, I'll Cry Instead. Yeah, Joe Cocker. It's not a super, like, wildly different rendition than the original. It just has a little more attitude, a little more gruff. But interestingly, not as much gruff and, that sort of growl that we associate with Joe Cocker later on. This is 1964 Joe Cocker.
Okay.
So this was before the first album. And it's very like a jovial rendition almost. It has a lot. I listened right after this one. I listened to the original again because it had been so many years since I heard the Beatles version, and theirs is a little more laid back. John singing with that sort of, it's a certain melancholy, but it's also that sort of cool detachment that he would throw on things. And there just wasn't as much percussion. Joe Cocker's version has a lot more percussion going on. I like it.
I don't have that much familiarity with Joe Cocker. What's his main one that people know? Is it the?
There's a few.
Okay.
His probably his first breakthrough was his cover of "With a Little Help from My
Okay,
Friends."
yeah, that's what.
And that's the first album is "Little Help from My Friends."
This
that's the one that probably
like
gets the
rough.
most radio play. Yeah, it's like just a brutal, soulful, just yell that he has. But later on, he also had like his later hits, like he had some duets and stuff. The names don't come to me immediately.
He didn't
but
do "You Are So Beautiful," did he?
That is, yeah.
Okay,
That was
which
one of them.
that-
That's
that-
probably his second biggest hit that
Yeah,
he ever had.
That song ties into one of my picks for today. So we'll
Oh,
see if we
nice.
get there.
Yeah. I only recently started getting a little more into Joe Cocker after I watched a documentary of his life. It was fantastic. It was really great. Yeah, like I've gone back and tried to listen to more of like the full albums, because up until this point I've always just like scattershot on YouTube, just finding interesting covers, because that's really what he quickly became known for, was his takes on songs. I mean, they went beyond covers, because it was just, he completely changed most of them. This one was a very faithful cover, and that was probably on the label's part of like, we need a really safe pop hit.
Yeah.
We don't need you, really subverting this one much. But most of the time, he completely turns them on his head. There's a lot of really great Randy Newman covers that he has, and then a lot of Beatles covers and stuff. So yeah. So Joe Cocker, big fan.
What Randy Newmans does he do?
Oh, my favorite that he does is "Guilty."
Yeah.
He does a cover of "Guilty," and it's so relevant to him because like that's his life. Like his struggles with addiction and everything like that. So when he sings it, and it's later in his career that he covers it, you could find stuff. So it's like he's already been through that shit, and so him singing those words, it just means so much to him. And yeah, it's great rendition. He also did like I think he did a cover of "You Can Leave Your Hat On," and some others too.
Okay.
Oh, he did. I Think It's Gonna Rain Today. He covered that as well.
Keep your hat on, because it's gonna rain.
Synchronicity. Let's hear another, Jesse.
A winter's day in a deep and dark December, I am alone, gazing from my window to the streets below, on a freshly fallen silent shroud of snow. I am a rock, I am an island. I built walls, a fortress steep and mighty, that none may penetrate. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. It's laughter and it's loving I disdain. I am a rock, I am an island.
So that's Paul Simon's solo rendition of "I Am a Rock" from his debut solo album, the Paul Simon Songbook, which there were some singles that he was on before that, going back to like 1958, but they're not it's not Paul Simon performing as Paul Simon. It's more Paul Simon as a songwriter, not ghostwriting for other artists, but I consider this like his first single.
Yeah.
And it was recorded, and the album it's from was recorded when after the first Simon and Garfunkel album came out, and kind of flopped, and they put a lot of work into it, and it flopped, and so he was pretty heartbroken over that. So he kind of just left the U.S. and went to go live in England for a while, and he just wrote a bunch of songs about being kind of lonely and rejected by the public, and then so that album is kind of unique because it's just him doing a lot of songs that were later hits for Simon and Garfunkel, and they're a lot more lonely and insecure sounding. It's kind of before Paul Simon before his ego got as big as it would later become, I think. So it's very like vulnerable Paul Simon. And then while he was in England, I think this is how it happened. The Wrecking Crew, the people, the studio session musicians, they did like a new backing track for Sound of Silence that had like electric guitar and drums and stuff, and then that ended up becoming a huge hit while he was still in England. So he was like rushed back to the U.S. to do Simon and Garfunkel again. But originally Simon and Garfunkel was like over because the album did so poorly, and then it was like a re-release of that song with the Wrecking Crew backing track ended up being like their first big hit. But between the two, he put out the Paul Simon Songbook, which is just these stripped down solo versions of songs that he would do later.
I didn't realize that's where, like, in the timeline that fit in. For some reason, I always just thought that, because I knew he had that first just songbook album, I just thought that was like after he was done with it all, like as far as the duo. So that's really interesting.
It was really early.
They even really took off. Huh.
Yeah,
that's cool. And most of them, is it just him and an acoustic guitar, or is there any like piano accompaniment?
I'm pretty sure it's just him and acoustic guitar. I don't know about any other like production flourishes.
Yeah. Well, that is lonely. I think you nailed it on that. I gotta go back and listen to that now, because that sounds very intriguing.
It's really good. Yeah, it's what got me into him as a whole, I think. It was listening to those versions of the songs.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse, should we get another one for Corey's list?
Yeah.
You get a shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime, sound of the river, you stop and you hold everything. A band is blowing Dixie, double fall time. You feel alright when you hear the music ring. Well, now you step inside, but you don't see too many faces. Coming in out of the rain, they hear the jazz go down. Competition in other places, but the horns, they blowing that sound. Way on down south, way on down south, London town.
Dire Straits with their debut single Sultans of Swing. This was an obligatory choice for me. I had to put this on there because to me, it's one of the most, if not the most, to me, the most impressive debut single. Because like right out the gate, just this fully formed sound, and not even just that it's fully formed of what they sound like, but it is a monster of a single. Like his guitar playing is just transcendent. Like, it's almost infuriating how this could be the first thing that they put out. It's the second recording. They did a demo of it first, and I have a feeling that the demo is probably pretty similar. It was just once because the demo got them airplay to begin with. That's what like blew up around like locally and stuff because it just got massive airplay, and that's when their record label heard that and they're like, well, let's bring it in, re-record it, just kind of clean it up a bit. Yeah, God, and the whole album it comes off of is really great. Their first album it holds up. It's really, really great playing.
And when is that from?
Oh shoot. Off the top of my head, I don't just have that year ready to go. Maybe it says on the thing, Jesse. I mean, I could easily look it up, but I don't want to. It was early 70s.
Okay. They
Definitely early.
they continued.
This says 78.
Okay.
78?
That
Really?
may be.
I thought it was much earlier.
That may be wrong, but
No,
that says 78.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Huh.
For some reason, I just thought it was more earlier.
They have the music video with like the early CGI, right?
Yeah, that was Money for Nothing. That was in the 80s.
Okay. Yeah, that's the main thing I know of theirs. They're another group. Yeah, just I'm noticing that as far as your picks so far, you have a lot more like guitar-based bands
Yeah.
than I do, and so I think you're going to show me a lot of stuff where there's an emphasis on guitar that I wouldn't have necessarily found otherwise.
Most of the stuff I was reared on, definitely guitar bands. Just having a dad that played guitar and like, so that was the stuff that was shown to me as, I mean, I think especially not just a dad that was playing guitar, but a dad who was learning how to play guitar as I was learning how to play guitar. So there's that certain excitement and obsessiveness over like Clapton is God, like that whole mentality.
My dad
So
also
yeah,
learned,
most of them have.
my dad also learned pretty late. So growing up, a lot of guitar-based rock as well. But because I thought I was a real punk rocker, I kind of rejected that. And so it's only been in the last few years that I've been going back and giving a lot of this stuff a chance. Was because I was like, well, if I'm going to learn guitar, I'm not going to learn, Smoke on the Water, or any of the standard dads learning guitar songs. And so it was like a 10-year trip of just like avoiding that stuff. And now I'm getting more and more into it over the past like 3 years or so.
Yeah. Well, Dire Straits is a great one to go back to. Just mostly Mark Knopfler is the leader of the band. He's the singer and the lead guitar player. It's interesting to become more acquainted with them because then you become acquainted with a wonderful phenomenon that happened through the 80s, which was bands who were, whether or not they realized it, trying to sound like Mark Knopfler. There's a lot of that going on, and for the most part, it's horrible. It's a lot of these. They especially after Money for Nothing came out as like just this smash hit, because that's the biggest thing they ever did was Money for Nothing. And
they also have the song that's in the movie trailers all the time too, right?
Possibly. I mean, that's kind of the one that jumps to mind. Is just those are their two like huge hits, and then they had other bigger hits that like in the UK, like Romeo and Juliet. That was a big hit, but it wasn't really a big hit here.
Okay. And are they from the U.S.?
No, they're
English?
English band. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, Court. We're here to learn. Let's hear another one, Jesse.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me. Now surf with me. Pop, dip, 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 pop, dip, dip. I got up this morning, turned on my radio. I was checking out the surfing scene to see if I would go. And when the DJ tells me that the surfing is fine, that's when I know my baby and I will have a good time. We're going surfing, pop, dip, 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 surfing, pop, dip, dip, surfing, pop, dip, 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 surfing, pop, dip, dip, pop, dip, 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 pop, dip, dip. Surfing is the only life, the only way. with me. Pop, dip, 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 pop, pop, dip, dip, from the early morning to the middle of the night.
That was the Beach Boys' debut single, "Surfin'," from 1961. It's not a great song. I would go so far as to say it's not necessarily even a good song, but it's still significant, I think, especially if we're talking about debut singles, because the story behind that song is the Wilson brothers' parents were out of town, and they used the money that they left for groceries and like pizza and stuff. They used that to rent instruments, and then they quickly recorded a demo of that song. And I guess either after it was recorded or while they were recording, it's kind of it's not clear. The parents came home and were like furious with them and were like going to make them pay back all stuff. But then they heard the song and took it to some family friend who owned a studio. And they recorded that and some just garbage song that this family that owned the studio wrote called Luau. And they're just very, very simple productions. In that one, you have just an unplugged electric guitar, and then stand-up bass, like a tall one. And then for drums, it's just a single snare drum with a T-shirt on it, and Brian Wilson's just like tapping it with his finger in rhythm with the song. And so it's just interesting because it's like such a weak single in terms of production, songwriting, vocals, all these things that the Beach Boys would be known for later. It's not present on the first one, and yet this song was still like a regional hit. It got on like the Southern California like #1, or like with the radio stations and stuff, and then nationally I think it was in the top 50.
Really?
But it's really more of almost like a folk song than like a surf song the way we would think of it with like twangy electric guitar and stuff. So it's
it's like kind of I was gonna say it's basically skiffle about the sea.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shanty.
Yeah, it's a shanty, if you will. It's a surf shanty.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, just if you can, the Beach Boys and the Beatles get like compared and ranked a lot about like who is the better band. But as far as like debut singles go, if you listen to, I think Love Me Do was the first Beatles single. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like a fully formed, catchy song with like really crisp, clear production, and like the vocals are on point. And the Beach Boys one is just like, I don't know, I just think it's interesting. I don't listen to that song often because it really is only the fragment of like a completed song. But it's just interesting to see where they started.
What I'm really curious about, like, if we put it in the context of what was happening at the time in pop music, was there other like bubblegum hits that sounded like that happening? Because maybe that's what you could attribute to, is just like, we've never heard this, so of course it sounds great.
Well, it was almost like a novelty song because the rest of the country hadn't heard of surfing yet.
Oh, okay.
Like it was just kind of, it was like a thing that mostly like scumbags in Southern California did. Like it wasn't like a nationally known thing. And so like surfing, it was already on its way to becoming kind of a national craze because of surf movies like Digit and like the comedy, like the musical beach comedies and stuff. They're all pretty bad.
Beach Blanket Bingo, the worst.
Yeah, and Beach Boys are actually in a couple of those. They're not good. But there were other acts that were doing similar things, like Jan and Dean was a local two guys that did kind of similar stuff, and really it was them that inspired the Beach Boys to record their own songs. So like Jan and Dean are just two kids from our area, and they have like a national hit. Why can't we do it? So that's probably the closest point of comparison. But yeah, it was just it was kind of an earworm novelty song that crept its way up the charts and was enough to get them an album with Capitol.
That's wild to even think that that's possible.
Yeah. Right.
Well, yeah.
For a dinky song like that.
Yeah. Let's hear another, Jesse.
All right. Well, first, Stephen was letting us know that Love Me
Oh.
Do was the first signal. So, Love Me
Well
Do.
done.
And then I just wanted to preface this going in that this was the first song that you guys have overlapped on in your your lists. So
Okay.
this was a song picked by both guys on their lists. Here we are.
Don't ease me. I've been all night long coming home. Don't ease me. I'm standing on the corner talking to Miss Brown. When I turned around, sweet mama, she was way across there. So I'm walking down the street with $1 in my hand. I've been looking for a woman, sweet mama, ain't got no place. Don't ease me. I've been all night long coming home. Don't ease me.
So, Court, I'm going to start by saying I defer to you
Okay.
to start talking about this because you're definitely a lot more well-versed in the Dead than I am. So
So-
I'll jump in after you.
What, Jesse? Was that selection from my list or from Corey's?
Oh, I'm saying that was the one that was from both of you.
Is it?
I think what he's getting at is there's probably different versions.
Exactly, because that sounded
Yeah.
like it came from a lot later. That sounded like
Oh, okay. That version
because the
that version was on Corey's list.
Yeah.
okay. If
Okay,
you-
so this already explains a question that I
Yeah.
was going to have. Because to me, that, like, I didn't dig real deep, but I was like, this sounds
Would you-
modern.
Would you like to hear Court's version?
Yeah.
All right, give me a second to set that up. You guys can talk for a sec, just in case
and
there's
Jesse,
a
did it
commercial.
say the year from the one that was on Corey's?
I will check that out in just a second. I got to skip commercials here, so I'm covering that up. All right, one
That almost
sec.
sounded like '80s Dead.
Yeah, it felt so modern to me, and that was like such a shock. I had never heard the song to begin with. I just looked it up and then went straight to YouTube and just found the best quality sounding one. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I love this song that I've never heard before, but like, I was absolutely expecting a completely different recording quality and
Yeah.
band quality. So, all right, that,
Yeah, it doesn't say
that makes a
the
lot of sense.
doesn't say the album, but it's a very clean remastered studio version of a great cut. So that's Corey's version.
Weird.
And this would be the version, the single version off of Court's list.
Don't ease me. I've been all night long coming home. Don't ease me. I was standing on the corner, looking all around. Well, I turned around, sweet mama, I was ready for. Don't ease me. Don't ease me. I've been all night long coming home. Don't ease me. The girl I
That's so much better. I
Yeah,
like that
that-
so much more.
Yeah.
And that's not to say I don't like the redone version. I really like that. This is like the guitar riff is so much clearer because
Mhm.
it's more of a harmonies are fantastic.
Yeah, they get knocked for their vocals a lot, but on
Which
their
is
studio
ridiculous
stuff,
to me. I've
like they-
never agreed with that.
I mean, some of their vocal, like Donna Jean Godchaux, she has some iffy vocal parts in the like early '70s. But
I'm not
we'll
even
save that.
familiar with her.
We'll save that for like a Grateful Dead specific episode. But that one, that's their first single from their self-titled album, which was on Warner Brothers, I think. and they had like no idea what they were doing. They were primarily a live band before that. They started off playing like jug band, like bluegrass, which explains where Jerry Garcia got his playing style. Was from like banjo finger picking. And then he later learned slide guitar as well. But early on, they had just kind of a bluesy garage rock sound, and in the studio versions, they like strip away any of like the acid like jams and stuff, and you see that as far as like arrangers and songwriters, they're pretty good. And so it frustrates me when people say like studio Grateful Dead isn't even worth listening to, because I think that when you listen to those versions, you can hear like the songs for the strength in songwriting rather than the strength of the improvisation for the live versions. And you might have noticed that the vocals were different on that one as well, between the two, and that was because it was back when Pigpen was their like front man. He was like do you know about Pigpen?
He's the keyboardist, right?
Yeah,
the organist.
And he was like the coolest guy in the group. He was like a biker before it was like a mainstream counterculture thing to do biker stuff, and he had a really, really strong voice. And it sounds good both live and in studio. He has a really like sharp kind of classic, like almost Blue-Eyed Soul or like R&B voice. And he died in the early 70s from like liver failure, because he, unlike the rest of the band, he liked alcohol instead of like weed and acid and all those things. And so he just kind of drank himself to death. And because he was just getting like drunk, he wasn't able to keep up with the improvising from all these other guys who were like, you know, trained musicians and also on acid. So they're going all over the place, and he's just doing this like very basic blues stuff. But he improvises lyrics, and I don't think that gets enough credit. Like on live versions, like there will be like a half-hour long version of like Good Lovin', like the Young Rascals song. They do like a long version of that, and he like, there's these long just like parts of him just kind of rambling into the microphone, and it's genius. He's just coming up with these lyrics that are great, and he's an awesome frontman. So it's a shame that he died.
I'd say that's a fair assessment. Honestly, I'm mostly familiar with just recorded Grateful Dead. I mean, I've watched some live clips and stuff, and I understand where the cliche is of the long jam, you know, the bad rap that they basically have. But I've always been a fan of what I have heard on record, because a lot of that stuff I was raised with too. I mean, like in our sort of circles of like our family and family friends, when they'd get together and all get the guitars out and the mandolins and the fiddles, Ripple was like a standard that had to be played. You know, so
that's what's so cool about that.
To me, it always spoke to me.
Is their songs are like a mix of like these Americana like folk standards that they've updated to be like, you know, funky acid rock, and then also their originals feel like their old Americana folk standards. Because that's just the kind of songwriting that they were doing, was like warped Americana, I guess.
Yeah, they were writing traditionals.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I dig that. I gotta go back now and hear some of that early stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar at all.
Dead.
Yeah. Let's hear another, Jesse.
Mr. Oswald with a swastika tattoo. There is a vacancy waiting in the English voodoo. Carving beef for metal on the guilty boy's head. When he's had enough of that, maybe you'll take him to bed too. Teaching he's alive, for he wishes he was dead. Turn out the TV, no one will suspect even your mother won't detect it. sister are doing it again. They got the finest home movies that
That was Elvis Costello with Less Than Zero. It's funny, before we started the show, we were all, the three of us were talking about how there was that original format of how pop song structure was. It was, for the most part, a minute and a half love songs or what have you. And this one fits perfectly into that, because if you notice where it fades out, like that chorus was done because it did it its one time, and so it was going to go into that next one. Like it's almost like they had these little markers along their songwriting that they had to hit the beats in time, and it works. Like you can scoff at it all you want, as you know, like, well, I'm into indie progressive, like I want experimentation and you shouldn't limit yourself, but goddamn, it really works. Like it hits you, like when it's done right. It's so sweet. So yeah, this is off of Elvis Costello's first album, which a lot of people just think about Allison as kind of the big single off of it, but this was actually released first. And I dig this song. I haven't dug into a whole lot of specific albums, but I have like a couple best ofs and a handful of albums, I think, that I've listened to with some regularity. But he's one of those guys that it's almost intimidating how much there is to dive into.
And collaborations with other people.
And collaborations, yeah. And I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't love all of it, so it's not like I can just soak up album to album. I find myself kind of searching around through the eras of like, well, I like this song, so I'll check out this album. But yeah, some really great stuff. Are you into much Elvis Costello?
Not really. Back when I was in high school, I read the Bret Easton Ellis book, Less Than Zero, which, in addition to like referencing the song in the title, there's a lot of other references to him as well, to Elvis Costello, and so that got me curious about him. And it's kind of like what you said, where like I don't like necessarily a lot of what I've heard, but the stuff that I do like that I've heard is great. So I need to like sit down with an open mind and give it another shot, because when I initially sat down and tried to get into him, it just didn't click for me. It might have been that I was listening to his very 80s sounding stuff, and so that just didn't settle. That didn't sit right with me. So I definitely need to dive deeper into him as well, because he's someone that I know is considered cool, and I look at him and he looks cool, and his album covers are cool, but the music still doesn't sound cool to me. And I guess that's kind of what the dad rock thing is about: is how do we make this stuff cool?
Exactly. Well, I think a great step into finding Elvis Costello being cool is like, once you realize that a lot of his songs, for one thing, are dark as hell. Like he has some of these songs that are just like the one that comes to mind immediately off of one of the only albums that I've listened to a bunch, which is I'm blanking on the name of the album right now, but it has a few of his like bigger hits on it. Like it has the collaboration with Paul McCartney, that's some gal's name. I'm blanking on a lot of stuff, but the song that I'm thinking of on that album is called Tramp the Dirt Down, which is this brutal, it's just a huge fuck you to Margaret Thatcher. And it's just the whole thing is this, and it's long, and it's a long, it almost sounds like an Irish ballad, because I think there's even like a tin whistle in it. And it's just saying, I want you to die, and when you do die, I want to be there standing over your grave and tramp the dirt down. I want you to be dead. Like, it is, scathing is the understatement of the century. It is such a brutal song. So that was one of the things that first really hooked me. I had a roommate who's like a huge Elvis Costello fan, so he played that for me, along with the rest of the album. And that whole album is dark as hell, because there's also like, I think it's the second track on it is about like a true story of an execution for like, I think it was like an innocent man, like someone who was just totally railroaded, and it's String 'Em Up, I think it's called. So would suggest checking out some of the heavier stuff because
Yeah.
he gets very heavy. And his guitar playing, I feel, is very underrated too. Like as a soloist, he does these really outside of the box, very violent guitar runs. They are not your standard sort of, blues based, noodling. Like he does really interesting stuff with his tremolo. Yeah.
Cool.
So there's my Elvis Costello rant for probably the month. I don't have a lot of those in me.
Babe, I'm gonna leave you. Well, you know I'm gonna leave you when the summer comes a-rolling. Leave you when the summer comes along. Oh, babe, that highway's calling. Yeah, that old highway's calling.
That was "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" by The Association. Do you know The Association, Colby?
A little bit. I'm somewhat familiar.
Their song "Never My Love" is apparently like one of the most played singles in world history, but I didn't hear it until the last few years somehow. But they came out of. Have you seen A Mighty Wind?
Yeah.
The Christopher Guest movie. You know the new Main Street Singers?
Mm-hmm.
The group that they are kind of a parody of, the New Christy Minstrels,
Mhm.
The association kind of stemmed out of the New Christy Minstrels into more of like a vocal harmony, sunshine pop with some folk influences. There's not a lot of that on that initial single. That only really seems to have the one lead vocal to it. But the further into their career you get, they get some pretty interesting, complex vocal harmonies. But they never quite. I don't think they ever quite stuck in the mainstream as like a cool band, despite how popular they were. They were always seen as kind of like the goofy, chipper guys. But if you look at the backstory of the band, there's like a lot of behind the scenes tragedy and stuff. So they're really not as like chipper as people say. And they have some just really nice like psychedelic pop that I think has flown under the radar. And they worked with a lot of really good producers and songwriters as well, coming up with cool stuff. And so that's the "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" by The Association.
I gotta check that more of them out. So were they, when you say like they were like a vocal group, were they also like players themselves on these
Yes.
albums, or were they?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were. I think that there's a couple of their albums, I think the Wrecking Crew might actually be on one of their albums, might be on Inside Out, but that I'm not sure on. Mostly they play themselves, and they're really good because they all have background in like traditional like folk playing, and so they have some pretty. Once they introduce some like reverb and distortion stuff to it, there's some pretty cool guitar parts as well. That kind of them and the Byrds kind of simultaneously did the merging of folk and rock in the early and mid 60s. But the Byrds, I think, have a little more staying power. Maybe because their hits were all Bob Dylan's like songs to start.
Probably has a little to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was familiarity. I mean, apart from just the quality of it, of course you can give credit to that. But I think familiarity goes a long way with staying power. Even if people at this point even know the Byrds versions more than Bob Dylan's, like it still began somewhere,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I dug that. I gotta check out more of The Association. That's cool. Let's hear another, Jesse.
stop that feeling when you're living in a small town. You're long and lean, things don't get you down. You're a top 10 kingpin in the borders of your hometown. Can't get hit, you work the jobs I quit. Don't you dig that style? Won't admit you just don't give a shit, 'cause your mind's gone wild. It's a sad thing, bourbon's all around. Stop that feeling.
That was the Tragically Hip with Ring Down. This is easily the latest song, or most current, I guess you'd say, for the sort of playlist we've got going together. That came out in '87. That was I've recently started getting into the Tragically Hip because to me they're a really interesting, almost anomaly of dad rock. Because, so to begin with, not a particularly great song, the one we just heard. I mean, it's not bad. It's not great. Nothing to really write home about. But in Canada, that was like the beginning of the, like, basically the biggest band in Canada. And they're interesting to me because as they progressed as a band, they maintained, like, instrumentally, they're a bar band. They're like, they're doing these like kind of bluesy riffs and pretty straightforward electric guitar centric, like heavy, rock guitar. But the front man, Gord Downie, by the third, he told them, look, I'm not going to sing words that aren't my own anymore. So from here, all the lyrics. And so there's this shift that happens where you have this bar band backing this poet. He's just like screaming these really interesting snapshots of his life, but also like from a lot of character point of views. And I mean, immediately went, in the direction of like, social commentary, in particular, Canada's horrible mistreatment of the First Nations tribes, and just everything that goes along with that. Really interesting band. I first became acquainted with them through the depressing yet also uplifting documentary of their final tour. He was diagnosed with, an inoperable of it, so he can get more of a life, basically. This was, I'm bad with years, but I want to say this was around like 2014. So fairly recently, they had like their farewell tour that was them saying goodbye to their country, essentially. And it is so powerful and so emotional. And just listening to a lot of the words, as a very powerful writer, I've become something of like, have you heard the good news about the Tragically Hip to a lot of my friends who could not care less. And I don't blame them because they're not, on the surface, they're not a terribly interesting band. But once you dig even just past that first level of they're just a blues rock band, some just brilliant poetry in this band. So definitely recommend checking them out.
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I hadn't actually listened to them before. That's the first song of theirs that I've heard, I think, and I did like it.
Yeah, it's good. Like, I don't think they have any songs that are bad. They just have a lot of songs that are like miles ahead of other ones in their catalog. He's one of the rare songwriters I feel that has the ability to write lines that don't need to rhyme all the time. Like, he has a lot of songs will, but like plenty of times, like, they don't need to because they're just such strong words, and just so direct. Like, they're exactly what they need to be. And just an incredibly interesting vocal style that at first when you hear it, I'm not so much what we just heard, but as he progresses his style, it can really ward off, I think, a lot of like listeners. On the surface, it could be weird. He has a very weird voice, but God, when it hits, it really hits.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to dive into that more.
Yeah. So you're another Jesse.
gonna sleep with me tonight and hold me tight. Louisiana lady, know that I need you. Louisiana lady, I love you. Louisiana lady, I love you. 6 more hours till I make New Orleans.
That was Louisiana Lady by the New Riders of the Purple Sage, a band that, like, if you asked me 5 years ago if I would ever listen to a band with the name New Riders of the Purple Sage, I would say no. That sounds lame and boring. And if you saw their album artwork of like a, like a Mad Magazine looking cowboy, and he's smoking a big old joint, I would have been very annoyed. It wasn't until I got into the Grateful Dead that I actually kind of discovered these guys, and they, Jerry Garcia is on the first couple albums playing slide guitar, which he learned later in life, which is interesting. So he's really good at it. But he didn't play it live very often. Some of the only times he did was with New Riders instead of with the Grateful Dead. But the point is, I started listening to them and I was like immediately shocked because that first album, the production on it sounds like 10 years ahead of time. And it's not in any like particularly like flourishy way or anything. It's just like really clean guitars and really clean vocals. And it's really catchy, and they're just playing this weird stoner country like LSD influenced country music, and it's great. It's kind of along with like Graham Parsons and Flying Burrito Brothers stuff. It's kind of like early alt country, I would say.
Yeah. Well, they were in that scene, weren't they, with like the California sound that was sort of emerging at the time, right? Is
The
that
new
correct? Like around
no,
that time?
they would have been up in the Bay Area more.
Okay.
Yeah, California sound is more like Los Angeles
Oh,
sunshine
that's
pop
true.
stuff.
Yeah.
They're more from that like Haight-Ashbury, like hippie acid scene.
Way
which
more
was-
drug influenced. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still going. I'm not sure how many original members are still in it, but the main guy, David Nelson, he's still touring, and yeah, they've a lot of really good songs, and I think people should check them out if they're interested in the roots of country music that doesn't take itself as traditionally. It doesn't take country music tradition as seriously.
Yeah.
And was willing to experiment a little more with like a sense of humor and with like drugs and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's very true. That I think that's a good point about that approach to country music, is especially at that time, in a lot of ways because of race, there was this certain sense of like country music is sacred and it can't be changed. Read that as it can't be played by people of color or anything like that. Like you
Right.
can't touch the establishment. So yeah, stuff like this was very aggressively against the grain, I'd say.
Yeah.
There was a lot of what was happening in Nashville in particular.
Yeah, the Byrds have that song "Drugstore Truck Driving Man," which is from the Graham Parsons era, and that's written about when they went to Nashville to record. I think it was for "Sweetheart of the Rodeo." This local DJ like refused to give them any airplay, and so they just wrote this song about this guy who's like a traditional country music guy who is, hiding not very subtly the fact that he's a racist and he only wants to play the same old like trucker hits and he doesn't want to like play anything new. So yeah, you're right. It's definitely like a shift because country music was so like square at that point. You really didn't have like outlaw country that much yet either. So country music just was incredibly uncool. Viewed as uncool through a lot of the 60s, and it wasn't until like these more acid country bands and then also people like Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt kind of popularizing country music for more discerning people than just like old racist people.
Exactly.
Which is cool because
because they were also doing something way more interesting with it. I think. They
Yeah.
recognize the form is so simple that it can be played with really easily. You
Right.
can really put so much emotion into 3 chords.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Let's hear another.
In his football uniform, he looks 10 feet tall. All the girls run after him, and my girl's in front of them all. 'Cause he's a football hero. She's in love with him. In every game, it's still the same. She talks of nothing but him. Oh, when he makes a touchdown, she goes wild with joy. With every score, I lose more ground to her golden gridiron boy. I'm too small to make the team. I can only play in the band, but I'm big enough to have a dream that one day she'll understand that I'm the one who loves her. He loves the cheers of the crowd. One day she'll see what she means to me.
And there we have Golden Gridiron Boy by Randy Newman. I hadn't heard that song until today. I'm a big Randy Newman fan, but I guess I always just assumed that early singles for him were actually later in his career because he had such a strong songwriting sort of foundation. So it's almost like, what his first singles would be, other people were playing. But
Right.
I didn't realize it went back this far. This is 1962. And I really dig this song, but in particular because I can't quite figure out if he's being ironic in it. Because it's 1962. This was the sort of songs that were being made. And there's not that typical Randy Newman twist where, maybe the protagonist in the song is a murderer or something. That's not there.
Yeah.
It is a very genuine bubblegum pop song. And I think that's what he was trying to do. And that's really interesting that it was before him trying to subvert expectations. It really seems like he just wanted to hit.
It kind of has almost a Phil Spector girl group backing
Yes.
vocal to it,
Big
which
time.
is interesting. Because I would never associate Randy Newman with that style of bubblegum pop, but it is really good.
Yeah, it is. It is very good, but it's also it's something that you would easily see him making fun of even 5 years after
Mhm.
this came out. So it's funny that I think he means it on this. It's before he decided screw your expectations because I'm not like other songwriters, so I'm gonna make the songs that I'm gonna make. I was pleasantly surprised by it, but I wasn't expecting it at all. I was thinking that I was gonna find something like a song that I was already familiar with Randy Newman. I think it's gonna rain today or something.
Yeah.
To hear this was really kind of knocked me for a loop.
Yeah, it's cool. Lou Reed also has his early group before the Velvet Underground. He also has some just very straightforward pop music, and it's interesting to hear it, a pre-heroin Lou Reed just doing pretty standard bubblegum pop rock
Not
stuff.
jaded.
Yeah.
there's no hint of irony or cynicism.
No.
They're just making pop.
Oh, we're still going? Let's keep going. Okay.
I was just gonna go until Jesse tells us to wrap up because there's not another
Yeah.
show. So I mean, we
Can we
could just
start
run our
the-
list through, I guess.
Can we start the clip over there since I talked over it?
Sure. I mean, technically, this could be the last. Was back and forth. It's courts, so it could be last, or we can keep going. Whatever you guys want to do. But yeah, I'll restart that since I caught you by surprise. I thought I'd been playing the lulls. I've just been going. I'm feeling it. But
There you go.
Here we go.
We'll tell you what. Before you start it, how about
Yeah.
this? If there's no questions in the forum or anything, we can make this the last one that we talk about.
Okay, I mean there have been just some comments here and there about people
Yeah.
enjoying the picks and stuff, but no real
Oh, that's
strict
great.
questions.
Great.
What if people said? Who have we heard from?
I can. There was. Let's see how far back. Colton Kammerer, if I'm getting that one right, was talking back about Elvis Costello. He said this year's model and Get Happy are his faves. And then just.
I think he also gave me the title. The album I was talking about, it was Spike.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Very cool album.
Veronica was the McCartney collaboration.
Veronica. Yes.
Steven suggesting that there should either be a Wrecking Crew specific or just session musicians
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That will be on the docket, Stephen, for sure.
But
You
yeah.
really can't talk about Dad Rock without getting into the session musicians.
Yeah.
Because they were the backbone. Like, it
Yeah.
cannot be understated how important sessions players were.
So a lot of these bands sucked when they started. They needed
Oh,
like
yeah,
professional musicians
absolutely.
to play the parts.
Yeah.
And La just chiming in that she's into the show and could listen as long as y'all want to keep playing. So, I mean, this will be like the deepest we've gotten into a show. I believe it's like 6. Well, I mean, we've only done it twice. But this is 6 each, which will give us about a 70-minute. We can do as many as you want.
This is the last one?
In
Yeah,
theory.
let's make this the last one.
All right,
That
we'll
feels
wrap it up.
nice and rounded.
All right.
Yeah, 6 and 6.
Yeah.
So that was the first track from U2's debut EP, which is called 3. And the song is called Out of Control. And I hadn't heard that song until a few years ago because I did not like U2 growing up.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was peak, like, How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb era. What am I trying to say? iPod. I forgot what an iPod was called. But like iPod commercial era U2. So they were like very present and very annoying. But this first EP that they recorded, they were trying to do like Joy Division style, like post-punk. And all 3 songs on it are just like, they're awesome. And I couldn't believe when I heard it, like, this is where they started, like, playing this kind of like melodic post-punk. And I think that first song is the best of the 3 on there. And it's from 1979, I think, which is also, I think, earlier than a lot of people would associate with U2.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and associate with that kind of sort of post-punk. It was immediately
Exactly.
post-punk. It was
Like
punk, but it was post.
I don't know. I think that EP and the single that came after it, which was recorded with Martin Hannett, who did the Joy Division albums, the producer, it kind of shows that they do have some like street cred, I guess, as far as like having authentic punk and post-punk origins.
Yeah.
Like they've definitely morphed into something different over the past 40 years, but early on they did have that kind of like, they were grounded in the same music scene as a lot of other bands that are held in a lot higher critical regard. But yeah, I just think that song's an interesting look at like the origins of a band that went on to become one of the biggest bands ever, like so big that they ceased being like a band and just became like
an entity.
just like right.
Ubiquitous. It's just U2. Yeah, it's U2.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
love hearing the rough beginnings of a band that becomes like that, because I feel like you hear the players more in that
Mhm.
sort of context. In particular, to me, this clip I just heard like showcases what I've always enjoyed about the band, which is the drumming. I think the drumming sounds fantastic on this. For me, like the boring parts of U2 are the effect-driven guitars of the Edge. That can get really boring to me.
Yeah.
And a lot of Bono's like vocal styles can grate on me a little. There are still like the major hits that'll hit me in a good spot every now and then. But yeah, I've always really dug the drumming in the band. Oddly,
Yeah.
like it always felt really aggressive. Even if the song itself was maybe a love ballad or something, like the driving force behind it always felt really, really rough. Yeah, I like that though. I've never heard that first EP that you're drawing all this from. So I definitely want to go back and hear that.
Yeah, it's on the like special edition of their first album now. They included all the early singles and stuff on that.
That's cool.
So that's probably the easiest way to find it on like
Yeah.
Spotify or whatever.
Nice. Well, I think this was a fun show.
Yeah.
I think this was our first attempt at having a theme, like a central theme. I think that worked really well to give it some sort of order to the chaos. So I hope you guys at home enjoyed hearing us gab about all this. Feel free to drop any suggestions on like the Stab page or any of our personal pages for bands that you want to hear us talk about, maybe specific themes for episodes.
So you want to be on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've already got a bunch of people reaching out to us. I'm sure you have as well, of like, oh yeah, this is right up my alley, get me on.
Right.
We're definitely going to have guests in coming episodes. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and see you next week. This
Goodbye.
is a weekly show.
Yeah.
And I'll get the next week's event up like immediately, so you can start communicating through the event, maybe if you'd like to do that.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
yeah, great idea.
Yeah, so that might be a place for it. And just to be warned, La is gonna fight you now. You called the Edge boring, so.
Sometimes he's boring.
They
Sometimes
should call him.
he's
They should
fantastic.
call him the Dull.
Oh,
Oh, snap. No, she's a big U2 fan, so that's you're gonna have a fight there.
My condolences to her ears as well as yours.
All right, thanks for the show, guys. I want to give everybody a heads up
Goodbye.
as we head out the door here. There's not gonna be a social distancing stand-up tonight, so you guys can go to bed early. It'll be back next week. In the meantime, we'll be back tomorrow with the debut of Rankinator, and I forgot what's on at 9. Rankinator and Body Posse comedy show. That's what it is. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next week for this show. See
Goodbye.
you tomorrow for everybody else.
Bye-bye. Oh, hey, Jesse, before you go, we're all like logged off, right, and everything?
I mean, we're
Not
talking
that it
over.
matters. People can be privy to this. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, they like to
I was
post
just
stuff.
going to ask if when you do get any spare time,
Yeah.
whatever that might be, could you add to that the image that you've already made up for
Uh-huh.
us? Could you add like 6 o'clock on the top of it? So it's
Sure.
like the full name of the show. And then if we could get like the little logos of like streaming on Twitch, streaming on Facebook, whatever like that, so I could like put it on Instagram and all that. I'm just
Sure.
trying to get more traffic to the different venues of this.
Absolutely. I'll put together a little bit more something. I've just been whipping these logos up.
Oh, of course.
The show's
Yeah.
5
I mean,
days
as
old,
it is,
Corey.
it already
Settle
looks
down.
Cool. I really dig the logo, by the way. Thank you for putting it together.
Absolutely.
It's just delightful. I love how silly it is because it's a silly show.
It is, but it's a lot of fun.
And yeah.
Yeah, I'll work on some stuff for you. This is the behind-the-scenes stuff you don't always get, guys. This is Dad Rock Talk After
you
Dark.
guys should probably tip. You should tip for this.
Well, yeah.
Donate to Stab
This is
for
like-
this sweet BTS.
Patreon content right here. All right.
Yes.